Have you ever felt drained by your own thoughts? Like your mind never truly shuts off, even in total silence? You analyze every detail, replay every conversation, imagine endless scenarios, yet, in the end, you're stuck, paralyzed. The world praises thinking, but no one talks about the dark side of thinking too much. The side that steals your energy, robs you of sleep, and makes you question your worth. There's a cruel paradox at play. The more intelligent you are, the more likely you are to fall into the trap of overthinking. Not because you're insecure, but because you see what others don't. You notice patterns, possibilities, risks. But seeing that much comes at a price. Maybe you've told yourself you need to stop overthinking, just relax, or let it go. But what if the problem isn't that you think too much? It's that you don't know how to channel that depth to your advantage. The truth is, intelligent people don't overthink out of weakness. They overthink because they carry a restless mind, a soul that searches for meaning in everything. And if that isn't understood, it turns into an invisible prison. In this video, we're going to explore what psychology has to say about this. We'll look at why brilliant minds suffer in silence, how these patterns form, and most importantly, how to turn this mental weight into power. If you often feel tired, indecisive, or emotionally overwhelmed by your thoughts, this video was made for you. But be warned, what you're about to hear may forever change the way you see your own mind. Have you ever found yourself lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, your mind racing in 1,000 directions while the rest of the world is fast asleep? That's not insomnia. It's the quiet unrest of someone who thinks too much. You replay old conversations, imagine uncertain futures, calculate every possible outcome of a problem that doesn't even exist yet. Your mind doesn't have an off switch, and even though you know that overthinking rarely solves anything, you just can't stop. Maybe you've heard things like, you overcomplicate everything, or stop overthinking, or relax, it's going to be fine. But instead of helping, these words only make you feel more out of place. As if your brain is faulty for seeing details others miss. As if feeling deeply is some kind of mistake. But deep down you know the truth, your mind is intense, complex, alive. And that's not a flaw. It's the source of your sensitivity, your intelligence, your empathy. People like you see between the lines. You notice tone shifts, subtle expressions, and feel when something's off before a single word is spoken. You overthink because you overlove, overfeel, overnotice. And in a fast, shallow world, that hurts. While others move confidently through life with fragile certainties, you question everything. The system, the values, even your own steps. That's why you carry a weariness that isn't physical. It's existential. Sometimes you try to silence your mind. You drown it in social media, lose yourself in work, pretend you don't care. But the truth is, you weren't made for the surface. There's an entire world inside you, full of questions, fears, ideas, and connections. And while that might make you feel isolated, it's also what makes you extraordinary. So let's go deeper into this experience. And maybe, for the first time, you'll realize you're not alone in this mental maze. On the outside, everything looks fine. You show up, meet deadlines, laugh in small talk. But inside there's a storm, a constant overdrive of thoughts, a need to understand everything, predict everything, avoid every possible mistake. And when you try to explain it, people don't get it. They say you're overreacting, that you just need to switch off. But how do you turn off something that was never built for silence? It's a strange kind of loneliness, not from lack of company, but from lack of understanding. It's like you speak a language that few can hear. You sense layers in emotions, subtext in words, tension in gestures. While others skim the surface, you're always diving deep. And in that depth there is beauty, but also pain. Because the more aware you become, the more different you feel. As if there's an invisible filter between you and the rest of the world. Then there's the anxiety of the overthinker, not the loud, obvious kind, but a subtle, elegant sort of unease. You anticipate scenarios, review decisions, project endless possibilities. You're always one step ahead, but that step costs you. It costs sleep, it costs peace, it costs presence. Because your mind is always on high alert, as if something bad could happen at any moment, and only you are alert enough to prevent it. And behind it all, there's a quiet longing. The longing for real connection. For someone to understand you without you having to explain yourself. For a space where your complexity isn't a burden, but a bridge. But this longing clashes with reality. Distracted people, shallow conversations, relationships that fear your depth. So you withdraw. You stay quiet. And you begin to wonder. Maybe the problem is me. But what if it's not? We live in a culture obsessed with quick fixes and simple answers. Don't overthink it. Go with the flow. Trust the universe. These phrases are repeated like modern mantras, light, comforting, but dangerously shallow. They assume that overthinking is a flaw, that a questioning mind needs to be tamed, silenced, numbed. But what if it's the opposite? What if overthinking isn't a problem but a calling? A signal that something inside you refuses to live on autopilot. A whisper from your deeper self, urging you not to settle. What the world labels as overthinking might actually be the beginning of real thinking. The courage to seek meaning where others refuse to look. And that makes people uncomfortable. Because in a world that worships speed and appearance, deep reflection is an act of quiet rebellion. There's a cruel myth out there that happy people are the ones who don't think too much, that ignorance is bliss, that detachment is always wise. But is it really? Maybe what they call peace is just distraction. Maybe that ideal inner silence is just the absence of depth. Overthinking isn't the issue. The issue is not knowing what to do with all those thoughts, because no one ever taught you how. Another myth. Overthinkers are insecure. But is questioning, analyzing, imagining different outcomes a weakness, or is it actually a sign of clarity? Confident people also doubt, review, and ask, what if? The difference is, they're not afraid of their own minds. True strength isn't about turning off your thoughts. It's about learning how to move through them without drowning. And that's a rare art, one that can't be taught with cliches. Carl Jung once said, "Thinking is difficult, that's why most people judge." And maybe that explains why reflective minds feel so out of place, because choosing to think deeply in a world of shortcuts is an act of courage. Jung believed that true awareness begins when we confront the shadow, the parts of ourselves we try to avoid, and often the overthinker is simply trying to make sense of that shadow, not to judge it, but to understand it. A Russian psychologist, Byung-Chul, also shed light on why our minds don't shut off. Her research found that unfinished tasks stay in our memory longer than completed ones, a phenomenon known as the Zeigarnik effect. For the overthinker, life feels like a series of emotional loose ends, unresolved conversations, unmade decisions, unlived futures. The mind spins, trying to close loops the heart hasn't found closure for. Then comes Aaron Beck, the father of cognitive behavioral therapy, who taught us how automatic thoughts shape our emotions. Overthinkers tend to build narratives based on assumptions, and those assumptions often skew negative. But the problem isn't thinking, it's believing everything you think. Beck reminds us that thoughts are not truths, they're hypotheses to be tested. When that truth lands, thinking stops being a prison and becomes a tool for self-awareness. Finally, Viktor Frankl, psychiatrist, philosopher, and Holocaust survivor, said that humans can endure any pain as long as they find meaning in it. That message resonates powerfully with those at war with their own minds. Yes, deep thinking can be exhausting, but it can also be transformative. The secret is giving your intensity a direction. Instead of fighting the storm, you learn to sail through it. Because, as Frankl said, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. To bring all of this into real life, let's talk about Clara. She was 29, a designer living in a bustling city, full of movement and silence all at once. On the outside, she was admired, intelligent, kind, responsible, but inside she was tired. Not of work, tired of thinking, tired of searching for meaning in everything, of playing out every scenario, of analyzing every gesture, every silence, every glance. If someone took too long to reply to a message, her mind would craft 10 possible reasons, and none of them were light. In a therapy session once, Clara confessed she felt like she had two brains, one living in the moment and the other watching from above, constantly analyzing everything. "It's like I'm both in the movie and behind the scenes," she said. That heightened awareness allowed her to see what others missed, but also trapped her in endless loops of thought. When everyone else had moved on, she was still processing. As a child, Clara was the one asking why people lied, why poverty existed, why the teacher cried when no one was watching. She never got answers, only warnings. "You're too sensitive." So she grew up believing that thinking and feeling that deeply was wrong. She tried to fit in, tried to be lighter, more carefree, more practical. But none of that was her. Her mind wanted to go deep, and the more she ran from that truth, the more lost she felt. Until one day, exhausted, Clara stopped running. She began writing everything she thought, like organizing an emotional attic. Instead of fighting her thoughts, she welcomed them. And she realized that the problem was never overthinking. It was having no space, no language to process what she felt. But this journey didn't bring immediate relief. On the contrary, it opened doors that had been locked for years. And behind those doors were shadows, pain, old wounds. And that's exactly what we need to talk about next. To feel deeply is like breathing underwater. It's possible, but exhausting. Those who think too much often feel too much, and those who feel too much carry the weight of the world on their chest. The overthinker rarely rests. Even when the body is still, the mind is traveling through memories, wounds, what-ifs. It's not a choice, it's a nature, a rich, intense, sensitive nature that sees subtleties where others see surfaces. But that sensitivity has a cost. And more often than not, that cost is paid in silence. The loneliness of the thinker isn't the absence of people, it's the absence of understanding. Because while others are satisfied with ready-made answers, you seek the real questions, and that makes you too much for some. So they pull away. They say you're overcomplicating, too intense that you need to relax. And you try, but you can't. Because it's not just worry, it's perception. It's seeing what others avoid, feeling what others dismiss. And that's draining. Then come the restless nights. Your body is present, but your soul is agitated. You replay conversations, anticipate outcomes, rethink decisions long made. You carry guilt that's not yours, absorb pain that no one else notices, and all of it happens silently, inside. Because on the outside, you function. You work, respond to messages, smile. But inside, you're slowly drowning in thoughts that never stop. And the cruelest part is that in this sea of thoughts, very few dive in with you. People love your listening, your insight, your depth, but few offer the same in return. You become a harbor for everyone, but drift aimlessly when you need an anchor. And that's when emotional exhaustion hits, not with a bang, but with a heavy silence, a quiet emptiness that slowly dims your light. And at that point, there are only two paths, to surrender or to transform. And that's where we go next. There comes a moment when you're just done running from yourself, when you realize the issue was never thinking or feeling too much. It was not knowing where to put it all. And when that truth hits, the shift begins. You start to see that your intensity is not a burden, it's power, that your restless mind is a compass, that your sensitivity is a rare gift in a numbed-out world. It's not about shutting your thoughts down. It's about learning to live with them without letting them consume you. Transformation begins when you stop asking for permission to be who you are. When you realize your depth isn't weight, it's your root. And the deeper you go, the more grounded you become. The world tried to convince you that you were too much, too intense, too emotional, too complicated. But now you see, you were just real. And realness unsettles people. It reflects what they're trying to avoid. And you begin to understand. Maybe being too much is a sign that you're finally aligned with your true self. With time, your choices change. You choose stillness over anxiety, solitude over the desperate need to fit in, deep connection over shallow interaction, and you discover beauty in the questioning eye, in the returning thought, in the feeling that refuses to go numb. The pain becomes your compass, the exhaustion becomes discernment, And what once isolated you now connects you to those who live on the same wavelength. This journey doesn't make you untouchable. You still feel everything, but now you know what belongs to you and what doesn't. You no longer drown in your thoughts because you've learned how to swim in them. And when the tides of uncertainty rise again, you remember, this too shall pass. You are the one who observes, who feels, who transforms. You no longer need to hide, because now you know. What made you different is exactly what the world needed to see. You spent so much of your life trying to fit in that you almost forgot what it's like to simply be, to be whole, to be yourself. But now something's shifting. You're beginning to remember. Not because someone gave you permission, but because your soul can no longer bear being silenced. What sets you apart is not a flaw. It's a calling, a constant reminder that there's something in you the world doesn't yet understand, but desperately needs to see. Purpose doesn't show up like a magical answer. It emerges in the silence, in the stillness, in those rare moments when you dare to really listen to yourself. It's there as between one thought and the next that you'll find a spark. You're not here to please, you're here to awaken. Life doesn't want you to shrink, to fit in, to edit who you are. It wants you to rise, with all your intensity, your questions, your unique vision. And once you start living from the inside out, something powerful happens. Your choices shift, your relationships shift. Even the way you see the world changes. Because now you're no longer trying to fit into a world that was never built for deep souls. You're carving out your own path, where being authentic is no longer a risk, but a requirement. And that inspires. Your purpose doesn't need to look impressive to anyone else. Sometimes it's in how you listen with your heart, in how you turn pain into poetry, in how you remind people that there's still beauty in feeling. You carry something sacred, the ability to see what others turn away from. That's rare, that's precious, and that's meant to be lived, not hidden. So keep going, even when it's lonely, even when it doesn't make sense. The road to truth is narrow, but it leads exactly where you've always wanted to be. Back to yourself. You made it this far, and that says everything. While so many people run from themselves, you dared to look within. You faced hard questions. You revisited quiet wounds, and you discovered that behind the noise of overthinking, there is a mind, vibrant, alive, meaningful. This isn't something to fix. It's a gift waiting to be directed. But now comes the most important part. What will you do with all of this? Will you keep shrinking to fit into shallow expectations? Keep apologizing for being intense, for feeling deeply, for thinking beyond the obvious? Or will you turn your complexity into power? Will you use your restless mind to build something new, as not to please the world, but to liberate your truth? Most people live on autopilot, but you don't. You've already felt it. Something inside you is different, something that wants to be seen, lived, shared. Maybe now is the time to stop hiding, to stop silencing yourself. Maybe it's time to accept what's been true all along. You were never the problem. The world just doesn't know how to handle those who think and feel deeply. So ask yourself, what am I postponing because I fear being misunderstood? How many ideas, creations, or truths have I swallowed to avoid unsettling others? How many times have I smiled to hide the chaos or the beauty inside me? Enough. Enough of asking permission to be who you are. Enough of shrinking to fit into spaces that were never meant for your soul. Your mind, with all its questions and storms, is a compass. And the world desperately needs people brave enough to think, to feel, to transform. If this resonated with you, then you already know what to do. Start today. It doesn't have to be big. Even a small step is a revolution. Write what you feel, say what you think, defend who you are, even if your voice trembles. Every authentic choice is a brick in the path of your truth. And if you want to continue this journey of self-awareness, depth and purpose, this channel is your safe space. Here, you'll never be too much. Here, your mind is welcome, your pain is heard, your intensity is celebrated. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Together, we'll keep exploring the psychology behind our thoughts, emotions, and inner conflicts. the very things that make us human. Now tell me, what part of this video touched you the most? What will you do with what's been awakened inside you? Share in the comments. Your experience might be exactly what another restless mind needs to keep going. You are not alone, and one day, the world will thank you for never giving up on being real.